Thank you for joining our webinar titled Sparking Revenue Growth within B2B Sales Organizations. I'm Lois Mueller, the Director of Enterprise Sales at xiQ, and I would like to address a few housekeeping items before we begin. We'd love to hear from you during today's presentation, so if you have a question, please feel free to send it through the Q&A channel at the bottom of your player, and we'll be answering your questions at the end of the session. And today's webinar will be available on demand after the live session and is accessible through registering on the website. And lastly, we'd encourage you to share this webinar within your social networks. So the conversation of needing new tools for your sales teams to be effective can be a tough one to start. Several factors come into play right off the bat. So do I have time for assessment and discovery? Is there room in the budget? And more importantly, how do I measure a return on the investment? So simply the thought of onboarding new tech might be overwhelming, but it doesn't have to be. So to provide additional insight on how one company discovered and successfully implemented a new sales enablement tool, we are joined by Jasmine Carman from DELL Technologies. Jasmine is an analytical professional with experience in technology, transportation, insurance, and environmental industries. And as an AI project consultant at DELL, she has spearheaded a pilot, developed a comprehensive launch plan in addition to a post-launch engagement strategy for a new AI tool, i.e. xiQ, and continues to consistently see high usage amongst sales teams. And so Jasmine, thank you so much for joining us today and walking both myself and our audience through your journey at DELL.
Yeah, really excited. Thanks so much for having me, Lois. I'm excited to talk through our xiQ journey. It's been a fantastic one to kind of grow together as both of our businesses. Now, DELL has been around for quite some time, right? But we're always looking for the next new innovative tool, both internally and externally, to fully position our services sellers. So really excited to talk through that journey today.
Thank you so much. And so since we'll be discussing how DELL brought on xiQ for their sales team, I would like to take a moment to provide our listeners with a high-level view of xiQ, which is an AI-powered sales enablement platform. It combines behavioral science with artificial intelligence to understand and engage your buyers on a more meaningful and personal level. And so Jasmine, like many when they begin the search for new tools, it's often because they have pain points or holes in their current solution. So could you let us know what problem you are trying to resolve at DELL?
Yeah, that's a great question, Lois. So the problem is not uncommon to what some of the folks on the phone might have had to go through over the course of the last year and a half. We're in an ever-changing world, both from a data perspective, getting net new data from all kinds of different sources. But now, especially for our services sellers, we have had to adapt quickly. And we needed to find a solution that would allow us to do so. One, we had to make sure that we were able to look internally, have conversations with people remotely, but be most effective in doing so. So if we think about the landscape before COVID, we really had, the meeting in the room, right? Our sellers could get to know their customers. They could understand and interpret body language and change the pitch as needed. Once COVID hit, that was gone, right? You may get on a Zoom call and have this face-to-face interaction that we're having now, but maybe not. And so you're having to try to change your pitch and adapt and really sell over this completely virtual world. So we needed to find a way to uncover, one, the information externally that would allow us to be fully prepared from a knowledge perspective going into those customer conversations, and two, allow us to change our pitch with the specific context. So, if someone is more analytical like myself, we need to know if that person is that way so we can present those numbers. Or if they're a more big picture thinker, we needed to have that information. And other than just, combing LinkedIn or doing some quick Google searches, our services sellers really didn't have that at their fingertips, which really led us to start the investigation and trying to understand which companies did that and how we could deliver that solution to them very quickly.
Okay, got it. So you saw the problem of needing or I guess it taking up too much time to uncover information so that you could change your pitch. And then, as you said, the adoption to virtual. How do you get to know someone if you can't read body language, if you can't be in the room, if you can't have that golf outing and connect on a deeper level? And so those are the kind of the two main takeaways, if I will, of the pain points that you were experiencing at Dell.
Yeah, that's exactly right, Lois. And I think if anybody's familiar with kind of the Dell model and how we came to be, right? We're very innovative in terms of changing our solution based on customer demand. And so rather than sit idling by and wait for the pandemic to be over and kind of let sales lull, we said, no, we've got to change this. We've got to figure out how to get that information into our systems and quickly for our services sellers.
Oh, that's so great. I mean, I work for a software company out of Silicon Valley, so I am all about innovation and change. And it's so refreshing to be on a call and hear when others in the, not our industry, tech specifically, but just in the industry and B2B sales and marketing in general, understand that you need to innovate, you need to adapt, you need to change rather than, like you said, sit idly by. So incredibly important. And then do you think that now with in-person events dialing back up and coming back, do you still find the need for virtual sales and the virtual capacity to get to know someone?
For sure. I mean, before you get your foot in the door, before you're in those in person events, you have to know your audience, right? You have to be prepared both from an account perspective to know what's happening with them, to know what their pain points are, maybe what some of the bragging rights that they have going in public right now are. So you have to have that preparation before you ever get into that meeting. So I definitely think it's very significant still, as we're heading into this virtual world, to utilize xiQ, and our services sellers are able to just print out sheets quickly to have all that information at their fingertips and prep as they're on the way to, their meetings or in the airport, right? If they have some downtime. Yeah,
Yeah,
100%.
absolutely. Perfect. Well, then, in that regard, could you walk us through the discovery process of incorporating new tools at Dell and then ultimately what brought you to choose xiQ for the sales teams there?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, my role is really to both vet external as well as internal solutions, AI, BI, ML, kind of all those data buzzwords, right? To make sure that we're arming our services cells to adapt to the customer. And so, one of those in that pain point that we just addressed, right, was how do we get this external facing data? How do we get the data both from a customer perspective as well as from a buyer insights? And so it's a funny story, Lois. We actually had an internal services sales leader come to us and say, "Hey, I was reached out to by xiQ. They sent me this profile. It is spot on. How do I get this for our services sales?" And we're like, "Okay, hang on a second, take it back. We need to understand what this is, right?" But as we started to dig in and uncover kind of the offerings of xiQ, we took a step back just to say, okay, is there anybody else in the industry that's getting us that external information, that's getting us the contact level insights, right? And do a little bit of an analysis of a pilot period where we say, okay, here is what we expect, and then see how the solutions deliver on paper with a small group of our sellers. And so through that process, we were able to kind of bring xiQ to the top of the leaderboard, right? Meeting the proof of concept, meeting all of the future needs of Dell as well. And we had to run some things internally, right, through your normal kind of vetting process from cybersecurity and finance and funding and everything like that. But once we were able to secure those funds and get it vetted, then what we did is we ran a pilot test. So we took about 40 of our services sales users across all of our regions here at Dell. So that's global. And we said, okay, put it in practice. Search a few customers before you prep for your conversations with, folks over the phone. Pull their insights and change your pitch based on the recommendations. And it passed with flying colors. Those 40 are still using it, and we've been able to grow to 950 users today. So starting with that pilot was really key in helping us truly vet the solution.
That's so great. And then I I bet there was a little bit of pushback when you said to your sales guys, hey, why don't you change your pitch? Like, why don't you change the ways and perhaps the things that you're used to based on the personality insights of your buyers and what you're seeing on a screen? And that's entirely new information. I mean, that's almost like teaching someone how to walk again because we're so used to reading body language. I use my hands when I talk, as you can see, and all of these just things to get to connect. And so I think that begs the next question when it comes to kind of adoption challenges that you might have faced. So ultimately at Dell, once you brought xiQ on, how did you drive that user adoption?
Yeah, that's a great question. And for our services sellers and really all of these sales organizations and otherwise, if you have delivery organizations in your companies that are on the line today, think about, me and you, Lois. We have to change. If I'm talking to someone at the grocery store or I'm talking to my mailman or just a family friend, right? I kind of change what I talk about based on the interest of that individual, based on how I'm receiving virtually or not. And so, one of those ways that we were really able to position this message to continue to drive and change your behavior was through that pilot tester. So, what we did at Dell is based on those pilot users, they really became our agents of change. They had specific use cases of utilizing xiQ both from an external customer search, from a preparation for their customers. And so driving and utilizing those individuals, it's almost like guerrilla marketing, right? We had some other forms of adoption, which I'll go into if you want to, but I think for us, really that piloting period for those customers is what helped us become so successful because they're doing the same job, right? So they could say, hey, I talked to XYZ, this is how I prepared. These are the recommendations that I use that I find successful in changing that pitch. So once we could get it on a true actual use case versus, just Jasmine positioning the message, right? That's really what helped drove the behavior and the adoption for xiQ.
Okay, okay. And I mean, I'm sure it's helpful when you have 40 individuals, like you said, being your agents of change and piloting the program. But you had mentioned briefly that you do have other forms of adoption as well. And so if you wouldn't mind divulging that information, just because it's so different in every company, I think if you had multiple points of addressing the change, addressing the adoption, is this working? I think that would really help some of our listeners as well.
Yeah, that's a great point. We did. So we also, we had the initial training with xiQ led. So you guys walked all of the sales individuals. We started off with 450 last year. Like I said, now we're up to 950. So we start with that initial training. That really sets the groundwork, right? Here's the tool, here's the information. They can ask questions on where the data comes from and how it's organized and how they can effectively use it. And then once we leave that session, we continue to pick up the ground in terms of advertisement and use cases. So we've got an email campaign. Once someone becomes a user, internally we have automated messages that are set up that sends them each week use cases. We've got overlaid information of how those 40 users have used it from quotes, walkthrough use cases, etc. But it just really helps to drive, okay, I'm looking at xiQ this week. Here are the common hits in which my peers used it. Maybe let me go try some of those. And then we also have a notification that goes out on usage. So if we see someone's usage falling off, if we see someone's usage kind of tapering in some areas, maybe on the customer insights view versus the contacts, we send them an automated message to provide feedback and insight. And then we kind of circle that back up. So if it's a lack of awareness of a certain button click or something like that, we can address it spot on. But if it's a broader kind of need or necessity, then we can bring it back to xiQ for that full feedback loop.
Wow. That notifications on usage, I mean, if we're not doing that already, that's incredible and such a good guide to see again how the adoption is taking place, if it's taking hold. And then I feel like when so many people start the journey for researching new tools and what's out there, one of the questions that they have as well is what are the adoption guidelines? How easy is this going to be to implement into my system? because again, if it's not compatible or integratable, so many people will just leave it to the wayside. And so all the different references that you just brought up and went into detail on are so helpful, not only for me, but I hope for our audience as well, just because on multiple levels, we saw that the compatibility and integration was pretty seamless, it sounds like, and easy.
For sure. And it's a journey, right? So when we first started with xiQ, what we had was just a web-based platform. So, if we think about if anybody on the line is working with sales individuals, they have a lot of tools in their toolkit, right? And sometimes it's very hard to remember those tools if they're not constantly kind of waving in your face, or you don't need to use XYZ tool every single day. And so one of the journeys that we've been able to go on with xiQ is the integration into Teams, into Outlook, into Salesforce. And for us, those are the tools that our sellers are using every day. So the more seamless, and you guys have done a great job, right? We have integrated xiQ into this tool. So not only do they not have to remember that another tool exists, but the applications themselves already pop up and say, hey, do you need a reminder on how to search for XYZ customer, right? You're chatting with someone over Teams. Maybe pull up the xiQ plugin and see, how best to communicate with them if you're getting either short answers or no answers at all. So that seamless integration has been key for us to continue our adoption going forward.
Oh, that's so great. And it's so helpful because I know for me, if I'm on a chat, like you said, or talking to someone on LinkedIn and they're sending me one-lining curt answers, I
Mhm.
immediately think I did something wrong. That's the
Right.
personality type that I have. And so then when I pull them up on xiQ and I see, oh, they're a captain and they actually prefer 3 sentences or less, and you shouldn't be put off by this. It's like, okay, great. I'm actually doing this right. And I think they're
Exactly.
interested, and here's like how I continue. And so just having that knowledge immediately and creating that what we call situational awareness
Mhm.
is so important, and to capitalize on it through a text, through a screen, I think is incredible moving forward, and innovative, like you said, to continue the growth.
Definitely. It's key. It's key. I think through the learnings that we have within xiQ, we're going to continue to develop in terms of integrating into new tool sets. But for us, it's been key to just bring that up to the forefront for everybody and really help with that seamless adoption. So it's been great.
And I definitely want to double click on the roadmap and what's ahead for xiQ. I know you've kind of
Sure.
got some of that, but before we dive into that, I would love to know what is the impact that you have seen using xiQ. I know you already talked about the increase in number of users. You went from 500 now to 950, but what else have you noticed?
Yeah, that's a good point. So we track our usage on a weekly perspective. So are people logging in 2 times a week? From that 450 initial number, we had about 65% of our people logging in, twice a week. And then we had upwards of about 86% of those people logging in at least once. So it's been great to see those numbers, but we are also tracking the deal conversion associated to that. So one of the metrics that we really focus on for our services sellers are, are you closing the deal? Are you winning the deal with the customer? And so we've seen through xiQ a 4-time more likelihood in closing deals if they've used xiQ for the upfront investigation and that relationship building process, as opposed to someone who is not using the tool. We still have, several of our other organizations outside of services that we can benchmark against, but it's been great to see that if they truly prepare on the upfront, they are much more likely to close the deal based on the insights that they gain around those contacts.
4x, what an incredible statistic. I mean,
Yeah,
truly.
you can't ask for better, supporting from a project perspective in AI, you always kind of set out on a goal, right? And our goal was 2 times the amount. Just we didn't know much, right? And so we were kind of figuring this out as we were going along. So we set that goal, and it's just great to even double that.
Wow. And then I know when we started today's conversation, again, we talked about the problems. Where are the pain points? What do you hope xiQ is hoping to solve or at least alleviate? And one of those was the time to uncover information. And so now that we're talking about the success and impact of xiQ, what have you noticed in regards to the time consumption for research for your team?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, before, just to kind of help set that stage a little bit further, folks were, going on Google to try to find those popular news articles or to try to find, how they were doing in the stock market and trying to compile all of this into a PowerPoint that they can then, fully prepare themselves for. And if we think about the time that it took while we were scoping XIQ, they said, it takes about 2 to 3 hours a week for me to be prepared. And that's for a customer that I might know very well. For a net new customer, it's going to take me longer. And so now, Lois, it's a click of the button, right? I can search for that customer and get that dossier packaged up, in under 5 minutes. So it's a huge time saver. And it really allows our services sales team to prepare more effectively because now they're preparing for the pitch. They're not preparing for actually collecting the information. So we've seen great progress on that. And then we've seen it actually cascade further in our organization. So, like I said, we started small with our services sales team members, but we also have kind of our hardware sellers at Dell. And so we've seen our services sellers kind of cascade this information to help everybody be prepared as well. So it's been great to see kind of that trickle down effect as well.
Yeah, and not only trickle down, but it sounds like just from your division at Dell alone, you're already witnessing the cross-functional utilization of this. And so
That's
this
great.
not only works for, like you said, technologies, it could be for hardware. And we've seen other companies as well talk about, well, hey, we could use this for client success. Because
That's
you
right.
always have to be in the know about who you're talking to and with your buyers and what's happening at your company. Because in order to keep that client, you again have to have your finger on the pulse of what's happening. So
Yep.
that's gosh, that's incredible to hear that already you're talking about, hey, we see the tool or the value of the tool, excuse me, and how this can be used in multiple avenues. So I'm looking forward to speaking to other divisions at Dell then and getting this on board on even a wider scale than what you guys currently have.
Yeah, definitely. We've seen the value quickly, and we sometimes always start out in sales. Obviously, I support the sales organization, but we really do see it in several other facets. Really, anyone that's talking to the customer from a customer journey perspective, we want everybody to be prepared at Dell, to have the background knowledge, to have the information, to be effective communicators to our customers. And so we're really excited to see where we can take this to those other divisions.
Absolutely. And so I think that kind of segues very nicely into the final question that I have for you, which is what's
Sure.
ahead on the roadmap for xiQ? We just talked about multiple divisions, but earlier you talked about additional integrations that you guys are looking at.
Yeah, that's a great question. So we kind of hit the nail on the head. We are definitely looking to expand this out to our other organizations. So as I mentioned, we support services sales, but we have hardware sales. You've got pre-sales. You have post-sales in terms of delivery and customer service and satisfaction. So really, we're looking at extending this out throughout the entire customer journey of anybody who comes in contact with Dell. So we're really excited to see where that can go and the potential there. We're also starting to integrate this into Salesforce. So as individuals are logging new deals from a sales perspective, so that upfront pre-solutioning and sales, that they'll have the information ready to go in there. We do have it in Outlook and Teams as it stands now, but we're hoping for that third integration. And then xiQ is always coming out with great new additions, great new features. And so, that's as those become available, we are happy to kind of test those out for you guys and work in our partnership and get those out to the rest of the organization. So very excited to see what's coming soon. There's always something. There's always, you guys have a very hefty roadmap in terms of how you are changing this landscape in this business. And there's a lot of others doing it, right? But you guys are so specific in terms of what you're working on that it really does help drive the value.
Great. And I mean, it's from clients like Dell that help us get better and innovate and continue to grow. Because again, as you guys said, or as you said at the beginning, you need to stay ahead of the curve.
Right.
You need to innovate, you need to change. And so with this new virtual reality, we again are asking ourselves constantly, how can we make this as user-friendly as possible? How can we enhance this experience for the user? Because the entire buyer's journey is that it's a storytelling. You want to make it easy. You want your sales guys to be successful. And so, how can we equip you with the best tool out there for the job? So, yeah, I'm excited. There's some things in the roadmap that I can't yet talk about, but I'm excited to show you in the future and for new clients as well. So, it sounds like we both have great things ahead and we'll continue to work together.
Definitely. We're excited. We're here for the journey and we're ready to get it out to our other organizations and see the great work and great information that you guys provide to the rest of the full journey of working with Dell. So we're excited.
Thank you. Well, Jasmine, thank you again so much. I truly appreciate all of the, like what I found penetrating detail you provided in today's session. So I want to let our listeners know that the floor is now open for questions. You can use the Q&A chat box that appears on your screen to post your queries. And we did have a few trickle in during the session as well. So give me just a moment
Sure.
and I will pull those up.
Yep. No problem. Ready for the questions, guys.
Perfect. So this first one comes from Frank, and he said, how does xiQ enhance the competitive differentiation of Dell's sales executives?
Yeah, Frank, that's a wonderful question. You know, for integration of xiQ for our services sales, it allows them to be more prepared and more effective in their conversations. You know, we've got our competitors out there, right? So we're all having similar conversations, but if you can connect to someone on a personal level with that insights and really change your pitch on how you're communicating with them to sell most effectively, it's a win-win for all because those individuals that we're selling to feel connected, right? They have an appreciation for us taking the time to understand how they like to communicate. And it's really easy on xiQ side, but for the customer, they feel, very supported. And then on Dell side, right, it allows us to be prepared and fully close the deal. So that preparation is really what sets us apart. And the speed of that preparation is also a benefit for us because it doesn't take us that long to really sift through the information and find what we need.
Okay. So the differentiation is understanding at a deeper level, and then, like you said, making the client and prospect feel like they are heard,
That's
and then
right.
have the ability to do that very quickly as well.
That's right.
Perfect. Our next question comes from Leslie. She says, how do you measure the effectiveness of the various sales tools and decide which to scale and which to sunset?
Yeah, that's a great question. So we'll use the xiQ for an example in terms of scaling, and then we can pull some other use cases for sunset. So it depends on the tool, right? It depends on the information that we're providing within the tool, whether it's internal or external. So the answer may vary, but at least for xiQ, what we did is we tried to tie it back to tangibles. How much net revenue is this selling us? How much additional deals are we able to close? Because from a preparedness perspective, you can have kind of a sales readiness index, right? Which allows you to make sure that you're looking at the right articles, you're pulling down the right contact information. But what does that net you is really how we measure the effectiveness. So that's why we took, the deal conversions for Dell, as well as kind of the continual usage. As we see tools start to fall off and start to, not be useful anymore, we kind of have different effectiveness measures. But we have an open conversation on, are these tools kind of meeting the needs of the ever-changing market? Do they still provide value for our services sellers? And if not, we have the conversations around what gaps we do need to fill in replacement of that current tool. So it depends on the tool in terms of sunsetting, but making a tangible KPI associated to the tool you need is how we were able to quickly scale to 950 from our initial pilot of 40.
Yeah, absolutely. Great way to measure effectiveness as well, like you said.
Definitely.
All right, and our next question comes from Benjamin. He said, in long B2B sales cycles, which I think we've all experienced,
Yeah.
how do your sales makers keep the buyer engaged?
Yeah, that's a great question. That's a wonderful question. So it's that constant contact for our sellers, right? And xiQ has the potential to tap into that marketing approach. I think once you leave someone alone, if we think about, if we can lean on our other common social media tools, right? It keeps me engaged on Twitter when I see a notification. If I don't see many notifications, I'm probably not going to click on it. We kind of leverage that same capability within Dell for long-term engagements. If there's anything that changes, if we're thinking about that from a deployment perspective, the constant updates, the checking in, and just a general conversation. Doesn't even have to be Dell specific, but having those touch points are really key in terms of making sure that our customers are getting everything they need and that they're continually hearing from us proactively instead of reactively.
Yeah, absolutely. I know for me, I mean, I use our own tool every day. And so it's great when I wake up and I have the alerts from xiQ about all the companies that I'm tracking and where the news happened overnight while I was sleeping. And then I can immediately act on it in the morning and again, create that situational awareness. So I feel that in the past, so many successes were based on luck or like a luck of timing, and now xiQ allows you to create the timing. So as you said, if there's no notifications on Twitter, you're not necessarily reaching out, but if it notifies you that something happened, you can then act on it instantly. And I think creating that time and constant contact is how you can keep buyers engaged in those longer sales cycles.
Definitely.
Wonderful. Well, I believe that is all the questions that came in throughout the session. So Jasmine, again, I learned so much on this call, and I feel like I do every time I speak with you. And so I want to thank you and everyone that joined us. If you weren't able to send your question live, please don't hesitate to reach out after the session and we'll follow up with you via phone or email. And for all the latest updates on B2B sales and marketing, follow us on LinkedIn, xiQ Inc. And then you can also follow the link in the chat to download the xiQ app from the App Store or Play Store. You will receive a recording of this session in your mailboxes within 48 hours. And if you have any questions or want to learn more about xiQ, you can log on to our website, xiqinc.com, and schedule a free consultation with us. So thank you again for joining us today, and we hope to see you soon.